we probably all exercise leadership in different ways, in different experiences in life. There are all sorts of examples of where we exercise leadership. I had never imagined that I would end up leading a Christian organisation in the way that I do in the United Kingdom. I think God has a tremendous sense of humour, actually, but it's been a tremendous privilege, and I've learnt things as I've gone along which I hope will be helpful for you as we just examine a little bit about the challenges of leadership and the opportunities of leadership in the 21st century. And then I hope that we can have a discussion about it and some of your observations as well, so that we can learn from each other, which would be great. There are challenges with leadership, obviously, and we shall look at some of those. They're challenges that can be challenges in relation to the organisations we work for, and if we do lead them, where we lead, or the areas where we are exercising leadership. But they can also be personal challenges, and I don't think we should minimise those. I think they are really, really important. So I want to share with you probably 5 things that I've learned as I've gone along. But I think it would be helpful at the beginning if I just made 1 or 2 observations about leadership and where we are in the 21st century. Now, obviously, I'm talking from the perspective of leading an organisation in the United Kingdom. So some of the things that I've learnt will be perhaps particularly relevant to the United Kingdom. But I think the general principles actually apply to all of us, no matter where we are working. And so just 1 or 2 observations, questions. Sometimes the question is asked, well, are leaders born or are they bred? And we'll look at that in a moment. I think probably potential leaders are born, but effective leaders are made. And what I mean by that, and I'll unpack that a little bit more in a moment, is that we are born with certain talents, certain characteristics, certain strengths that God has given us. But we need to grow and develop those. And so we have the potential, but actually a good leader will be developing those along that journey. I think there are particular things about leading a Christian organisation as well, which we'll touch on. In the United Kingdom, and I think probably across Europe, the model of leadership has changed over recent years. I think it's true to say that leadership perhaps is moving away from the more traditional autocratic model of I'm the leader, I say what happens, I tell you what to do. And it's much more now, I think, to a consultative, collaborative role of leadership that is seen to be very effective. The new leader will persuade, empower, collaborate, and partner with people. The sort of command approach is seen to be not terribly effective in leadership. I think we ought to just make an observation at the beginning about Christian leadership, because actually there are very important things that we can take from the world's model of leadership. But actually, if we're in leadership in Christian contexts, there should be something different about the way we do it. And I think really it comes down to 1 or 2 basic things. It's a blending of the natural gifts that I've referred to that God gives to us with spiritual qualities. We are called by God, and we must never forget that. I love the words in John where Jesus said, "You didn't choose me, but I chose you and appointed you to go and bear fruit." So first of all, a Christian leader is called, and that calling is fundamental to what we do. But I think as well, and actually Peter talked about this the other day when he was doing the Bible study, that Christian leadership is born out of inadequacy, not adequacy. We rely on God. It's great, isn't it, that Paul said that God chose the foolish things of this world to shame the wise. I take great comfort from that. He chose me and I'm rather foolish. But the important thing is that in that we are relying on God. Now, of course, I'm not saying that we're so totally inadequate that we can't do the job. That's not what I'm talking about. But we recognise that our calling comes from God and that we must rely on him. He is the one who has called us and will empower us. And therefore, in observation of this, we must let God be our guide. There are real pitfalls for the Christian leader if we don't. And I think as Christian leaders, we face one very strong temptation. And that is that we don't cultivate our personal walk with God. You see, it's very easy, isn't it? We're involved in Christian work. We may be preparing Christian talks. We're doing the stuff. And yes, we are. But if that's the only time we're relying on God and studying his word, and dare I say praying, then actually we're not cultivating that personal walk with him, which is so valuable. It's been said that it's actually those internal pressures and factors, the personal factors, that are the greatest threat to leadership. And that's why, in our inadequacy, we have to cultivate our growth and our walk with God. One of the saddest things, I think, that many of us face day to day, in reality, and sometimes succumb to, is the whole thing of burnout. It's a huge, huge challenge. We need to lead from a place of rest in God. Probably all of us from time to time can think of the pressure of the incessant workload. And so does our relationship, the time we spend alone with Jesus, slide off or completely fall off the list? We need the space to refocus, to replenish, to wait patiently for him, and yes, to take delight in him. And that has to be in our daily rhythm. It involves discipline. The great characters of the Bible did that. Moses sought God. And the ultimate example, of course, that Jesus himself withdrew to be with his Father. We need to be secure in who God has made us and who he's called us to be, privately as well as publicly. We need to be the leader that God has called us to be. I wonder if, like me, you ever look at the situation you're in now and you think, crumbs, how did I get here? And actually, is it all just one big bluff and somehow someone sometime is going to call my bluff and they'll see that I'm not actually this person that they think I am? Certainly in my story, I would never have expected to become chief executive. My background was education and the health service. In fact, I started working for Care as a volunteer. And now I'm in a position of leadership. And so there are various things that God does to equip us and anoint us as we go forward with him. In these initial observations, I would say as well, it involves hard work. We need to become thinkers, planners. Trusting in God, yes, but we need to put the work in. We need to persevere. We need to have resilience. And I think that probably is one of the things that as Christian leaders, sometimes we don't have. We have to cultivate resilience, and you might want to come back to me on that. So our leadership is born out of inadequacy, not adequacy. We're called by God, and God needs to be our guide, and we need to seek that. But I wonder, just in introductory remarks, well, if we're leading organisations or ministries, thinking of organisations, what should a Christian organisation look like? What are we talking about? What sort of organisation do we want it to be under God? Because it should be distinctively different from other organisations. Not that they're not good, but there should be something very special about an organisation that's Christian. It should have firm roots. A God-given vision for what they do. And very often, Christian organisations, in my observation, fail or don't prosper because of two things. They either don't remain true to who they are and where they come from, and as a corollary of that, they don't move with the times. You need to do both. I was at a reception recently with quite a major Christian charity in the United Kingdom, doing a fantastic work. And it was a reception celebrating something that they'd just done, and they had quite an eminent speaker. And he said something that really struck me. He said to this Christian organisation that was providing incredible care for children in a very professional way, but they were a Christian organisation. And the plea from the speaker was, don't be tempted when you're seeking government contracts or you're trying to do it this way, to move away from the fact that you are a Christian organisation. Don't park that because you want to get the money. We need to remain true to our roots. We need to have amongst our staff a common goal. We often have a discussion amongst ourselves in care. Well, do people come and work for us? Yes, they're Christians, but do they come just to do a job? Or do they come because they see it as a ministry? And it should be the latter. You need a motivated staff. A Christian organisation will have a motivated staff. It will always be developing, as I said. It will be undergirded by prayer. Fundamental to the whole makeup of the operation, of the organisation. Faith and trust in God should undergird what we do, but also that balance between faith and prudence. And that's a difficult balance. We say that we are, and I'm sure like many areas where you work, we're a faith-based organisation. But we have to balance the books. And we have to make sure that the finances are there to do the things we do and to care for the staff that we have. But there will be occasions, and we need real wisdom in this, there will be occasions where we take a faith decision, where we say, actually, this isn't in the budget, but actually God is calling us to do this, and we need to step out in faith and do it. I can think of a classic occasion a number of years ago when we were asked to join with some fellow Christian organisations in fighting the attempt of our government, and we failed, but fighting the attempt of our government to bring in same-sex marriage. And a group of 4 Christian organisations joined forces with a common message to campaign against that piece of legislation. In order to do that, at the outset, they had said to us, we need a commitment from you of £20,000. Now, we hadn't got that extra £20,000 in the budget. But in talking with other people in the organisation, our advisors, the trustees, people we worked with, we felt we'd got to do it. This was a defining moment. We had got to do it. So we did. That was in the December. We came back after Christmas, came into the office in January, opening the post, and there was a cheque for £20,000. Now, it doesn't always happen like that, but I just use that as an illustration that sometimes you have to say, we've got to step forward in faith and do that. So that's an undergirding. And so, Christian organisation, firm roots, based on God, prayer, motivated staff, but actually we need to be a faith-based in what we do. So what are the lessons that have been learned? What is it about leading a Christian organisation? What do leaders need to be like? I don't believe that leaders are formed by a sort of a momentary encounter. It's actually an ongoing reflection, development, execution. But what are the 5 lessons that I'd single out? Well, the first one is, quite simply, leaders have to have a vision. It's a combination of insight with foresight, imagination with the status quo. But we know the words of Proverbs, don't we? Where there is no vision, the people perish. Bobby Kennedy once said, "You see things as the way they are and ask why, but I dream things that never were and ask why not." And there's a sense in which the leader will be the second, dreaming the vision and asking, why can't we be like this? Mark Twain once said, if you don't know where you're going, you're sure to end up in the wrong place. We need to have that clear picture, that vision. Now, it will be slightly different for different people, I accept that. I can think of someone who I've worked with over the years who has had a very checkered area of ministry, from working with Jackie Pullinger in the Forbidden City, to working in a crisis pregnancy area in the UK, to actually working with a think tank, influencing policy by being an advisor to a member of our House of Lords in the UK. But she has one vision that she's never moved away from. And her vision is to get involved in public life to change our abortion laws in the United Kingdom. Now you might say, well, she's not doing that, is she? But actually she's seen everything she's done as preparing the ground, setting things in place. That's her overarching goal. For others, it won't be quite as clear as that and as determined as that, but we need vision. We need the big picture. We need to strive towards that goal of the high calling that we have. Some people will talk about it as a dream to leave the world in a better place. Whatever it is, it requires commitment. It requires political skill, and I don't mean that necessarily in terms of engaging with politics, but the savvy, the knowing how to do it, that sort of skill to be able to keep the larger picture in view. A leader is constantly looking at the outcome. A manager looks at the process. Now, I'm not saying that a leader can't be a manager, and there are managerial skills that a leader probably needs. But actually, leadership and management are different. The leader sees the big picture, looking at the outcome. The manager, the process. Now, we need the process people. We need the people who are going to take that vision and put the steps in place to make it happen. But the leader has the vision. I wonder what your country, as you look at it, will be like in 5 to 10 years' time. What strategic thinking are we engaging in to make sure that we're not taken by surprise at the state of our countries in 5 to 10 years' time? What are the things that we need to be engaged in? What's the vision? And of course that means that as a leader, we mustn't be bogged down in the day-to-day. Ha ha. Understanding the important rather than the urgent. That is one of the big challenges. because it is so easy and sometimes inevitable that we get bogged down in the day-to-day. But a leader must have that vision, needing to have a clear strategy against a background of continuous change. So a leader leads vision. Following on from that, and part of it, is that leaders must understand the times. The men of Issachar understood the times. Organisations are living things. Ministries are living things. They're always changing. Even if they stand still, they're changing. They're probably going back. But even if that period of standing still, and if you're not going back, it's still changing. A good leader helps to transform something that's now into something else. Constantly assessing the situation, knowing how to take the next step. In care, we came to a position when we reached 25 years old of saying, are we still needed? When care began, some nearly 40 years ago, there were no other Christian organisations doing what we were doing in the United Kingdom. Now there are a number. So we ask the question, well, if there are a number, are we duplicating? Are we still needed? We came to the decision that we were, and we didn't just make that decision on our own, but we came to the decision that each of us had different sort of nuances of where we operated. And we could work together, but we also did our individual thing. But we need to always be assessing, understanding the times. More than anything else in these days, I would say, we need to understand the context in which we work. Society is changing in our countries rapidly. Some of the changes are happening incredibly quickly. How do we understand that? How do we communicate? What way is still relevant? How do we remain true to our roots, but how do we do it in a different way for a different age? How do we engage with the younger generation? What are we doing? Understanding what's going on. We had a very interesting discussion in the Politics and Society Network this morning, looking at how society has changed and were there any pivotal moments that caused that change. And one of the areas that somebody brought up was the way, certainly in the United Kingdom, and I think in other parts of Europe as well, to a greater or lesser extent, from a time where some of the homosexual relationships, the way we view gay marriage, whatever, that would never, ever have been thought to be something that would happen. And yet within the United Kingdom, not only is it legal now, not only have the contracts for sex and relationships education in schools been given to those groups that are gay and lesbian groups, not only that, but also public opinion has changed completely. With a very poor percentage of the population, they have managed to change public opinion completely. And the question was asked, how did they do it? Well, actually, the roots of it started way, way, way back. And they were very, very clever. But the signs weren't spotted. And now we're in the situation we're in. There are repercussions sometimes from things that happen that seem perhaps, well, a bit of a necessary evil, but, you know, let's go along with it because we care. So, for example, there's the classic phrase that the generation in the United Kingdom that legalised abortion is now the generation that are being killed off by the generation that they had arranged abortion, that they had voted for abortion for. In other words, the younger generation now looking very much and arguing very strongly, although they're not that young now, for euthanasia, physician-assisted suicide for the elderly. When the abortion laws were passed in the United Kingdom, I don't think anyone thought that they would encompass the breadth that they do now. Understanding the implications and the times. Of course, there are very real challenges to change, and they take their toll on a leader. Loneliness. It is a lonely job, and that's why it's vital to have friends, family, support around us. There are times when we can't communicate with others in our organisation because it's not the right moment to, and so we're carrying something ourselves. It's a lonely job. Need courage. You can't always be popular as a leader. You can't be everybody's friend because you'll be nobody's leader. Yes, of course, we need to deliver the pastoral care, and I'll say something about that in a moment. But we also need to be helping people to be productive. And sometimes difficult decisions have to be taken. And that is hard. Communication is a challenge. Sometimes it might seem too hard to make the changes that we need to make. And so we don't do it. It's hard. We need others to help us. There are always human consequences. I remember a number of years ago, and I said, I am making some personal reflections, where we had to take some very hard decisions about losing some staff. And in a Christian organisation, that is incredibly hard. Because you have people who are not only there because they're passionate for what they do, they believe they've been called by God to be there. And you're suddenly saying, sorry, there isn't a job for you. But sometimes that needs to happen. But in doing it, communication is vital. There is always fallout, but people need to have endings before you can have new beginnings. It involves loss, it involves grief. It can affect people in ways that you don't begin to imagine. I remember when we did that, probably 3 or 4 months later, a member of staff who was a very faithful member of staff, who we were not getting rid of, who wasn't actually based in our head office, but worked from home. And she came home one evening, and on the doormat was a letter. And she immediately saw it had come from us, because it had been franked from the care offices. And her immediate reaction was, they're going to make me redundant. Now, there is no way, anyway, we would have done it in that way. But such was the climate of unsettledness as the consequence of decisions we had to take, that was her immediate reaction. We need to be aware of those sorts of things. We need to listen. We need to listen to what God is saying to us through friends and enemies. What's going on under the surface? And we need, as I've said already, to build resilience. We need energy. We need to be persistent, even when there is resistance. So a leader needs vision. A leader needs to understand the times and sometimes make necessary changes, and that can be hard. But probably one of the most important things to say is that a leader must build a team. A leader has to have followers. It sounds so trite, doesn't it? But a leader has to have followers to ensure those followers. Leaders, yes, set up the vision and have that vision, but they've got to sell it. Got to bring people along. A leader is someone who influences people to accomplish a purpose, turns a dream into a reality. It's hard sometimes. Someone has said that a leader takes people to places they need to go but didn't necessarily want to go. Selling the vision. and empowering others. We need to be spending time, because it's a godly principle, investing in those who work with us, to grow people, to identify where people's strengths lie. There are all sorts of tools that we can use to do that. Finding where people's strengths are and playing to them. Looking for the leaders of the future. Are the people in our organisations and our ministries who are going to be those people who carry the vision on? Well, we need to be investing in those people for the future. In caring for your team and our teams, in ensuring those followers, empowering others, I believe we need to avoid the danger of the second best. That is such a subtle danger. It's not bad, but it's not the best it can be. In setting the vision and communicating the vision, we've got to make sure that we take people to high standards. We need the right people in the right jobs, in the right places, and not settle for the humdrum, the second best. Oh, it's good enough, we can do it. Our God demands that we live and work to the highest of standards, and therefore the leader has to set high standards. It needs to be clear what's acceptable and what's not. Because after all, accountability is a godly principle. I have a colleague who works in another Christian organisation, and I was really struck by something that he said when we were talking once. He said, I run my work, my team, where I set incredibly high standards. But he said, I want it also to run alongside being outrageously gracious. And that means that there are situations where you won't necessarily just do things by the book, because that's how you've got to do it. You'll actually care for people. Someone with a particular personal challenge at home. You know, the policy may say, well, they've got X amount of days that they can do it or whatever. In the right situation, understanding what that situation is and being gracious, outrageously gracious, and perhaps giving them more time to care or whatever. In the way we deal with our people, being outrageously gracious while also maintaining the high standards. Really, really important. I think fourthly, and this is incredibly important too, leaders must be honest. Now, as Christians, we'll sit there and say, well, of course they should be. Of course they should be. But let's just unpack this a little bit. What do I mean when I say leaders must be honest? First and foremost, I think leaders need to be honest with themselves. We need to understand ourselves, how we work, what our skills are, and we need to be ourselves. Now, I don't know if you fall into the temptation that I have done many times, in that I look at other people, I look at other Christian leaders, and I think, oh, they are so good. They're much more godly than me. They're doing it much better than me. And that's quite disempowering, actually. Now, I'm not talking about boasting and saying that we're the best, we're the most wonderful people imaginable. We're so good at everything, and because we're not. But it's being honest with ourselves and saying, how has God made me? How am I wired? What skills has He given me that only I can do for Him? And to do it in my way well, God's way, obviously, but to do it as me, not as somebody else. I don't know whether it's a particularly female thing, so forgive this as an observation, but I think women do themselves down all the time. Now, that may be a bit sexist and it may be not a true observation, but actually, God has given us talents and gifts, and we need to recognise in the right way that God has given them to us for a purpose. And if he's called us, he will anoint us and he will help us and empower us to do the job that he's called us to do. I remember very early on when I was made chief executive, a colleague of mine was made chief executive in another very similar charity. And I had someone who was mentoring me, and I remember about 9 months into the job having one of my mentoring sessions with her. And I said, I actually don't think I'm the right person for this job. And she said, well, what do you mean? So I said, well, and I mentioned this particular guy. I said, well, look at him. He came in. Look what he's done. He's completely transformed that organisation. He came in like a new broom. We have an expression, a new broom, sweeping clean. Do you know that expression? He changed everything. It was fantastic. And I come in and I looked at what I'd done in 9 months and I couldn't really think, what difference I'd made. And she said something very wise. She said to me, you were right for where you are. He was right for where he is. If he'd done it his way in the organisation that I worked for, it would have been disastrous. And so in the right way, yes, we can learn from others. But we need to recognise who we are in Christ and rest in that and trust him. Identifying our own personal style of leadership is incredibly important. Are we a visionary? Are we a detail person? What sort of person are we? No leader can do everything. And that's why it's really important to have people around us who complement the skills that we have. We need to be teachable. After all, we always learn, don't we? And as I've already hinted at, we must avoid and counter the temptation to sacrifice our time with God. We have a public face, but what in private are we really like? So we need to understand who we are. We need to be honest with ourselves. We need to be honest and teachable. And when we realise that we're not particularly good at something, to bring people around us who can help us. I think limited self-perceptions are actually very dishonouring to God because he has given us skills that we must use. We have worth. Let's seek his face. What is that worth? Let's talk to others and talk about what are we good at? What do they see us as being good at? We need to reflect on that and be aware. We need emotional intelligence to be attuned to our own limitations and strengths, to recognise how people are feeling, helping to manage our own emotions and others, being clear-headed in crises. That in turn breeds confidence in others. So we need to be honest with ourselves. We also must be honest with our staff. Now you might say, well, that goes without saying, doesn't it? But we need to be attuned to a whole range of emotions that our staff as people will be feeling. We need to be socially aware and politically astute. We need to recognise, as I've said already, where change is needed. We need to recognise that we may think we have communicated something, but actually they have understood it in a completely different way. I'll give you an example. We have a member of staff who we thought we had actually really helped her. She was the sort of person who She had a very detailed finance job, and she was in an office with a lot of other people. And she said to her line manager, you know, I'm finding it really difficult working in with the things that I have to do with everybody else around me. So we arranged for her to move to another office. Now, we didn't have a lot of space, but we had an office which was in the basement. Now, admittedly, it's the basement. So, you know, it's the basement. But it has a window. And in fact, the person who'd been in the office before had made it really, really nice. She'd got a sort of easy chair sofa in there. She'd put some pictures up. There was plants. There was, you know, there was a table lamp. There were cushions. There were, you know, it was actually quite a nice office. All right, it was the basement. I accept that. Something else happened that upset this member of staff, and it was an issue that we were dealing with. But when she then, a little while later, in relation to this issue that happened, she then said, well, I obviously shouldn't have said anything because you banished me to the basement. We thought we were actually helping her and giving her something that she wanted. In her mind, she'd been banished, punished. She was down in the basement. So we don't always get it right, do we? We think we're giving one message. I know it's a silly example in one way, but we think we're giving one message, and actually it's taken totally differently. And that leads us to something else. We need to admit our mistakes if we're being honest with staff. We need to recognise that we don't always get it right, and good leaders have small egos. And actually we need to say, when we have screwed up and made a mess of things, or we've got something wrong, to apologise. We need to be able to have that clear set with staff of clear values, clear goals. What are those values that underpin our organisations that we won't compromise on? Have we made that clear? So honest with ourselves, honest with our staff, but you know, we need to be honest with the world as well. We are upholding God's values, the highest of ethical standards, in a world where often those values are not accepted. And doesn't the media love it when a leader, a Christian leader, falls? Aren't the fingers then pointed? But as we've illustrated already in the few days we're together, good leaders do fall. And therefore, I believe that in being faithful and true to the world, we have constantly got to ask God to keep us walking with him, purifying our motives. That's actually quite a hard one. Why am I doing what I'm doing? There are real temptations if we are working in an organisation or a ministry where we have a day-to-day engagement with, I don't know quite how to describe it, but I'll say the world, those out there. And our opinion is sought, and they like us, and you know, we're seen to be as valuable, and we have something to contribute, and we're great. And the temptation then to think that we're actually more important than we are. The temptation to succumb to their values. Well, it's not the right moment to actually talk about the things that we really stand for. We're just influencing by our presence. Now, we may be, but actually we constantly need to be coming to God and say, just purify my motives. Am I doing this because it makes me look important? Am I doing it because it makes our organisation look important? Or am I doing it actually to further your kingdom? The tendency in the world is to cut corners. and to get away with it? Are we having high standards in terms of how we organise our finances, how we're open, the messages that we give? So we need to be honest with ourselves, with our organisation, our staff, with the world. We need to be building a team. We need to understand the world in which we operate. We need to have that vision that comes from looking at the world as it is and what God is calling us to do. But probably the most important thing that I can say is surely that we must be Christ-like. Christ was the perfect leader, wasn't he? What an example. I'm tempted to say, you don't need any of the leadership books, you don't need me standing here and talking, just look at him. Now, of course, we do need to develop our skills and so on. I'm not saying that we don't do that. But actually, look at Jesus. He was a visionary. What a vision. God's vision for his world. He was a coach. He helped people. He created situations where people could ask the right questions. Think of the woman by the well. Think of that story. The questions that she asked of him because he couched it in a particular way. He coached those around him. He didn't compromise the vision, the message, but he helped people work through the things that were closest to their hearts. He was a radical. You've only got to look at how he related to the role of women, for example, or the outcast in society that no one would look at. A Christian leader sometimes has to be radical because we have a different way of doing things. We have a different goal to the goal of the world around us. So he was visionary, he was a coach, he was radical, he was the consummate team builder, wasn't he? You don't need me to tell you that. Look at that group of 12 that he called. Now, if we're picking a team to put round us as a leadership team, would we have picked them? I don't think we would. What a motley bunch. You know, you've got the zealot at one end, the patriot, the freedom fighter, get rid of the Romans at all costs. Then you've got Matthew, who's the tax collector. You've got the hot-blooded Peter. You've got fishermen who, with the best one in the world, they weren't necessarily the most intelligent members of society. Perhaps I'm doing them down, but you know what I mean. You've got such a different, varied set of people. And he built that team. And he used that team, certainly 11 of them, to turn the world upside down. The team builder. Above all, of course, and it's something I've not said yet, although I've alluded to it in what I've said, Jesus was the servant leader. He was the servant leader. He who's least among you will be great, he said. Paul reminds us in Philippians, rather in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. The servant leader. And that's what we should be, above all. Yes, a leader gives direction. Yes, a leader does exercise power to a greater or lesser extent. But I wonder what sort of power we want. I wonder what sort of power we're exercising in our organisations and ministries. I wonder what sort of power God is calling us to exercise in his world. Are we leading others to meet those needs? Where, perhaps to be a bit more sensitive as we reflect on it, are the inconsistencies in our lives before God, we're the only ones who probably will know that. Where are those inconsistencies? And so, in saying what I've said so far, and we're going to come and take some questions and just talk about this in a moment now, but it's not groundbreaking. But I would say that what I've noticed, for what it's worth, is that there are different models of leadership, but actually a leader will cast a vision, but must have that vision first themselves. We're operating in a world in which we need to understand. We need to know how to work. We need to see the signs of the times. We need to equip our organisations to meet those needs. With all the challenges that brings, we need to understand the times. We need to build a team. And boy, isn't that great. Actually, when you have a team round you, there is nothing like it. Those relationships are incredibly special. And I think that's something in a Christian organisation that we can do. I'm tempted to give a personal story, and I don't know whether I should, but I will, because it says something about the team that I work with. I had a very difficult year last year in that I lost my husband. And I went back to work, having been off work for quite a long time because he was unwell. Perhaps earlier than most people would say you should go back. Do you know the staggering thing? I felt totally safe, and that team helped me through it. Now, I don't claim credit for that, but that's what a Christian organisation should be like. There for you, caring for each other. And that's a very different model to the model that the world has. So forgive a personal illustration, but it says something about them. So building a team, a great team, but being honest with ourselves, being honest with the world, being honest before God, and then above all, recognising who's called us, who's empowered us, and being like him, because there is no better model.